My name is Maya Collins. I'm 30 years old, and a few weeks ago I learned exactly where I ranked in my own family. I didn't hear it during a fight or in some dramatic argument. I heard it by accident, standing in the hallway with a warm mug of coffee in my hands, when my father's voice drifted out of the living room and sliced straight through me. "Your brother's new in-laws are elite," he said. "Maya will embarrass us. She can't be there. Do you understand? Don't let her ruin this." He said it calmly, like he was talking about bad weather or an inconvenient schedule, not his daughter. Like I was something fragile and messy that needed to be hidden away. My younger brother had just gotten engaged to a woman whose family lived in the kind of world my parents worshipped from a distance. Magazine cover resorts. Charity galas. Private planes disguised as business travel. Overnight, my life in Austin, the one filled with spreadsheets, broken booking systems, and late nights untangling financial messes, had become a liability. To them, I wasn't a professional. I was an image problem. They didn't care that I spent my days rebuilding revenue models for hotels that were quietly bleeding money. They didn't care that companies trusted me with decisions worth millions. In their eyes, I was still the awkward girl who asked the wrong questions at dinner, who didn't know which fork to use, who made people uncomfortable just by being curious. So while they packed designer outfits and rehearsed polite smiles for a New Year's Eve engagement party at a luxury resort, I was told to stay home. Keep it simple. Don't complicate things. They didn't want me near the guests. They didn't want me near the family. And they definitely didn't want anyone knowing I was part of them. What they didn't know was that those same elite in-laws had been working with me for months. Quietly. Under a professional name, not a family one. They trusted my numbers with the survival of their business. And on the very night my parents tried to erase me, those people would be staring at a wall, recognizing my face, and saying my name out loud in a room full of witnesses. But that part comes later. Growing up, I never thought of myself as embarrassing. I just thought I saw things differently. At family barbecues, while other kids ran through sprinklers, I sat at the folding table counting how many hot dogs people grabbed and noticing how Uncle Mike always left early. I asked questions adults didn't like answering. Why do we invest in companies drowning in debt? Why do we say money is fine if mom works 2 jobs? People laughed at first. Then they stopped inviting me into conversations. My parents, Tom and Elaine Collins, would pull me aside afterward and whisper sharply that I needed to be normal. Smile more. Talk about school. Stop interrogating people. Meanwhile, my brother Ryan seemed to glide through every room effortlessly. He knew when to laugh, when to compliment someone's watch, when to bring up golf or real estate. People relaxed around him. He made my parents proud without trying. One memory still burns. At Ryan's high school graduation dinner, I was standing too close to a waiter, asking about tipping policies and hourly wages. I bumped into his tray, and marinara sauce exploded across a guest's white dress. The table went silent. My mother's face turned the same color as the sauce. My father grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks and hissed that this was exactly what he meant. That I didn't belong in these settings. After that, I stopped trying to fit into their world. Instead, I leaned into the one place I felt steady. Numbers. In high school, I taught myself spreadsheets for fun. In college, while other people posted party photos, I ran experiments on website layouts for a tiny bed and breakfast that couldn't afford a real agency. I studied analytics and computer science and discovered something that felt like relief. I could take chaos and turn it into clarity. Messy data didn't scare me. It made sense. Hotels started finding me. Small ones at first. They all had the same problem. Empty rooms. No idea why. I'd sit in my dorm at 3 in the morning, adjusting prices, reworking ad strategies, watching graphs slowly tilt upward. It felt like solving puzzles no one else wanted to touch. Back home, none of that mattered. When I landed my first real client, my mother smiled politely and asked if I was still doing that online thing. My father waved it off, saying it was temporary, that I'd get a real job eventually. Ryan went straight to law school. Joined a corporate firm, and instantly reclaimed his golden status. My parents introduced him as our future partner at a major firm, our pride and joy. When I showed up to family dinners in jeans after 12-hour consulting days, my mother whispered that I could at least pretend I didn't work from my bedroom. At some point, something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to change direction. If they were never going to see my value at their table, I'd build it somewhere else. Quietly. I registered my own consulting business and started saying no to events where I knew I'd be the punchline. I chose dashboards over dinner tables. Data over small talk. And while my parents polished Ryan's image, I learned something they never bothered to understand. In the right hands, numbers can change the fate of entire companies. The first time Harrington and Vale entered my life, it was because someone was panicking. I was half asleep in my Austin apartment when an email came in marked urgent. A mid-size resort chain was in trouble. Bookings had collapsed. Marketing spend had burned millions with nothing to show. They needed help fast. A few hours later, my phone rang. Graham Harrington introduced himself, his voice controlled but frayed. He told me they'd been promised miracles by agencies that delivered pretty slides instead of results. He asked if I could dive into their systems and tell them what was actually broken. No video call, he said. Bad connection. Audio only. I liked that. I didn't need to be seen. Within days, I was buried in their data. Years of numbers. Patterns no one on their team had noticed. Static pricing in a market that had become wildly dynamic. Ads targeting the wrong people in the wrong places. A checkout process that chased mobile users away at the last second. So I built a plan. Not flashy. Not safe. Dynamic pricing tied to demand. Ruthless cuts to useless ad spend. New packages for people who weren't flying internationally but still wanted escape. I told them it was risky. Graham listened, then said something that changed everything. If your numbers are right, he said, we have nothing left to lose. The first month barely moved. The second month bent upward. By the third, revenue followed. Graham called one night, his voice lighter than before, and told me they wanted to celebrate the turnaround publicly. They wanted my name. My face. I sent a headshot, half expecting nothing to come of it. At home, my family still saw me as the awkward daughter who needed to be managed. Upstairs, my laptop glowed with dashboards carrying the same logo that would soon be embossed on my brother's engagement invitations. When my parents decided I was too embarrassing to be seen, they had no idea how deeply my work was already woven into the world they were desperate to impress. And they had no idea how close the truth was to stepping out of its frame. Ryan called me about 3 months after Harrington and Vale's turnaround really started making noise. I could tell from his voice before he even said anything. It had that polished excitement he always got when he felt like he was moving up another rung. Are you free to grab coffee? He asked. I've got news. We met downtown at one of those minimalist cafes with concrete floors and drinks that cost too much for how small they were. He showed up in a tailored suit even though it was a Saturday, smiling like the world was finally aligning the way it was supposed to for him. I'm engaged, he said, barely waiting for me to sit down. To Lila. Lila Harrington. For a second, my brain stalled. Harrington. As in Harrington and Vale. The Harringtons? I asked carefully. He nodded, eyes shining. Her family owns this massive resort group. They host charity galas, political fundraisers, all that. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. In a good way. I smiled because that's what sisters do. Inside, it felt strange, like two versions of my life had just brushed up against each other without fully colliding. That's great, I said. I'm happy for you. He talked about the proposal, the ring, how our parents reacted. Of course they were thrilled. This was the kind of connection they'd always dreamed about, the kind of last name they like to drop casually in conversation. Then his tone shifted. "So," he said slowly, tracing the rim of his cup, "there's a New Year's Eve engagement party. It's at one of Lila's family resorts. It's big." I nodded, waiting for the obvious follow-up. Flights. Dresses. Logistics. Instead, he cleared his throat. "I think it might be better if you sit this one out." I stared at him. "Sit it out?" "It's a very particular crowd," he said. "Her parents, their friends. They're used to a certain environment. You know how you can get." "How I get," I repeated. He lifted his hands defensively. "You ask intense questions. You don't really play the game. Mom and Dad think it might be stressful for you." "For me," I said flatly. "Or for you?" He didn't answer right away, and that was answer enough. "Ryan," I said, keeping my voice even, "I literally work with hotels and resorts for a living." "I know," he said quickly. "It's just optics. We only get one shot at a first impression. Lila's family is elite. Mom and Dad are already nervous. They think it's safer if you don't come." Safer. Like I was a liability. A loose wire that might spark at the wrong moment. "So I'm not invited to my own brother's engagement party," I said, "because I don't fit the image." He winced. "It's not like that. We'll do a smaller family dinner later. Just us. You know I love you. This is just strategy." When I got home later that day, my parents were in the living room, voices low. I stopped in the hallway without meaning to. "Her family is elite," my father said. "We can't risk Maya rambling about money or questioning someone's business model. She'll humiliate us." My mother sighed. "She doesn't mean to, but this could be Ryan's doorway into something better. We can't let her ruin it." I stood there long enough to hear every word, then quietly went upstairs. My laptop was still open on a Harrington and Vail dashboard, real-time bookings flickering across the screen. The same brand that would host Ryan's party. The same family my parents were desperate to impress. They were terrified I'd embarrass them in front of people whose business I was actively helping to rebuild. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. Fine, I thought. If they want to hide me, let them. They have no idea how small their version of this story really is. New Year's Eve came fast. My parents buzzed around the house talking about outfits, flights, what gift would be appropriate. Ryan sent me a picture of the invitation once. Gold foil. Embossed logos. "Wish you could come," he texted, like the decision hadn't been deliberate. The morning they left, I watched from the doorway. My mother in a new dress she couldn't really afford. My father adjusting a tie he pretended was designer. They waved. I waved back. That night, fireworks lit up Austin while I sat alone with takeout and my laptop. Photos flooded my phone. Chandeliers. Champagne towers. Lila descending a staircase like she belonged in a magazine. In one video, I heard my dad's voice in the background saying proudly, "That's my son. He's marrying into the Harrington family." I turned my phone face down and opened a different window. The Harrington and Vail Analytics dashboard. Occupancy rates climbing. Revenue bars filling in. The numbers told a different story than the one my family was celebrating. An email notification popped up. From Graham Harrington. He wrote about how transformative the year had been. How close they'd come to collapse. How my work had changed the way they understood their business. Attached was a mock-up labeled Wall of Innovation. When I opened it, my breath caught. A long wall of framed case studies in one of their flagship resorts. Near the center was my headshot. My name. My work. A gold plaque that read, Maya Collins, Data and Growth Strategist. They planned to unveil it at a major partners and family event. I leaned back on my couch, fireworks echoing outside, and smiled for the first time that night. They thought they'd erased me. They had no idea my face was already waiting for them. After that New Year's Eve, it felt like someone quietly turned the brightness up on my life while my family kept acting like I was still stuck in the shadows. Harrington and Vale didn't just keep me around. They locked me in. First it was a long-term contract. Then another. Then late-night calls about expansion plans, new properties, acquisitions. I was suddenly running simulations on what would happen if they shifted pricing strategy across an entire region, forecasting demand for shoulder seasons, arguing with executives about whether short-term profit was worth long-term brand damage. It was the kind of work people like my parents bragged about other people doing. The difference was I didn't brag. I didn't announce it. I just did it. My bank account changed. Not in a flashy way, but in a way that felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I replaced my sputtering old hatchback with a reliable hybrid. I fixed the leak in my bathroom ceiling that I'd been ignoring because it felt irresponsible to spend money on non-essentials. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment that didn't creak during thunderstorms and didn't smell like old carpet no matter how much I cleaned. Still, when I showed up at Sunday dinners, my parents talked to me like I was dabbling. "Oh, how's your little consulting thing?" my mother would ask, smiling politely, like she was being supportive. My father would nod and change the subject back to Ryan and Lila. Wedding plans. Guest lists. Venues with ocean views. Charity boards. People worth knowing. And my mom kept sending me photos like they were proof of something. Ryan and Lila at wine tastings. Ryan in tuxedos. Lila in dresses that looked custom-made. Screenshots of articles mentioning the Harrington name with captions like, "Your brother was there last night." Can you imagine? At one dinner, Ryan mentioned casually, like he was sharing the weather, Graham is hiring some kind of genius consultant for their data strategy. Guy's basically a wizard. If I play this right, I could get pulled into some big deals. I took a slow sip of water to hide my reaction. My mother looked impressed. "That's the kind of company you want to be around," she said. "People who know how to make things happen." I wanted to laugh. The wizard she was admiring was sitting right in front of her, swallowing her pride with a sip of water. But I didn't say anything. Let them chase proximity to power, I thought. I was too busy building it. Then, in early fall, an email landed in my inbox that made my spine straighten. It was from Graham's assistant, written in that crisp, polished tone that meant this was official. They were finalizing details for a major partners and family gala at the Miami flagship resort. It wasn't just a celebration of the turnaround. It was also an engagement gala for Miss Lila Harrington and Mr. Ryan Collins. And Graham and Celeste were especially excited to honor me that evening. They wanted me front and center when they unveiled the wall of innovation. Attached was the invitation. Even through a digital screen, it looked heavy. Formal. Embossed. My name was printed near the top under a section labeled Strategic Partners. Ryan's name sat lower under Family of the Groom. I stared at that for a long time. My parents hadn't told me about this yet, but I already knew exactly how they'd talk about it when they did. They'd make it sound like the guest list was microscopic. They'd talk about how select it was, how only the right people got in. And somewhere between the wardrobe planning and the gift shopping, they'd figure out how to keep me out of the picture again. Except this time, the Harringtons weren't inviting me as Ryan's awkward sister. They were inviting me as the reason their business was alive. I called Graham to confirm attendance, keeping my voice steady like this was just another professional event. He sounded genuinely thrilled. "We've been telling everyone about you," he said. "I can't wait to finally introduce you properly. I want to see their faces when they realize the person behind those numbers is real." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there letting the irony settle over me like warm light. My family spent years treating me like an inconvenience. A social risk. A problem to manage. Now I had an invitation that put me in the spotlight of the very world they worshipped. And it wasn't something I begged for. It was something I earned. The week my parents finally mentioned the Miami Gala, it played out exactly as I expected. My mother called with a breathless tone like she was announcing we'd been selected for a royal audience. "Maya," she said, "you won't believe this. The Harringtons are having an ultra-exclusive gala at their Miami flagship. And we're invited." "We?" I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly, already rushing ahead. "It's New Year's again, kind of, but fancier. It's a celebration and an engagement event. Lila's family only invites the right people, so this is huge." I waited. I didn't help her. There was a small pause, like she was stepping around a puddle. "And of course," she added, "it's mostly for Ryan and Lila. You know how these things are. It'll be a lot. Very formal. We'll figure out what makes sense for you." There it was. The attempt to put me back in my corner. "I'm going," I said simply. Silence. "What?" she asked, like she didn't hear me correctly. "I'm going to the gala," I repeated. "I was invited." Her voice tightened. "Maya, this is not the time to be difficult." "I'm not being difficult," I said. "I'm being accurate." She tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. "We'll talk about it later." We did talk about it later. My father called and tried a different approach, the calm authoritative tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "This crowd is particular," he said. "We just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Or overwhelm people." "Overwhelm people," I repeated. "By existing?" "You know what I mean," he snapped, then softened it. "We just want the night to go smoothly." And suddenly I understood something very clearly. They weren't afraid I'd embarrass them. They were afraid I'd be seen. Because if people saw me, it would expose the lie they'd spent years telling, that I was the one who didn't belong. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't try to convince them. I just booked my flight. And as the confirmation email hit my inbox, I felt something settle in my chest. This time, there would be no hiding me. Not in Miami. Not in that resort. Not under those chandeliers. Because my name was already printed on the wall. The Harrington flagship resort in Miami looked exactly like the places my parents used to linger over in glossy magazines. Polished marble floors that reflected the light like mirrors. Palm trees taller than most houses, arranged with the kind of care that told you nothing here was accidental. Flowers everywhere, layered and dramatic, probably costing more than my first car ever did. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I'd been asked to. Not as Ryan's sister. Not as a +1. As a strategic partner. At the entrance, a coordinator smiled and handed me a badge printed in clean black lettering. Maya Collins. Data and Growth Strategist. Seeing it there, official and undeniable, did something strange to me. For once, my work wasn't being reduced to that online thing. No one asked me to explain it slowly. No one looked confused. Inside the main foyer, the wall of innovation stretched across one entire side of the space. Exactly like the mock-up Graham had shown me months earlier. Gold frames, soft lighting, carefully curated stories of recovery and growth. Each frame told how the company had survived its hardest year. My frame sat near the center. My photo. My name. My work. I stood there for a second longer than I meant to, letting it sink in. Not because I needed validation, but because it felt like proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. That the nights, the stress, the self-doubt had actually led somewhere real. Graham and Celeste found me quickly. They greeted me with warmth that had nothing to do with optics and everything to do with gratitude. They introduced me to board members, department heads, people who spoke my language. Numbers. Forecasts. Strategy. I lost track of time talking shop, laughing at inside jokes about bad data and overconfident agencies. For the first hour, I forgot about my family entirely. Then I heard my mother's voice. It floated in from the entrance, high and breathless. "Oh my God, Ethan, look at this place." I turned just enough to see them walk in. My dad in a suit that suddenly looked a little too tight under the chandeliers. My mom gripping her clutch like it might slip away. Ryan and Lila ahead of them, polished and confident, moving like they belonged. My instinct was old and familiar. Shrink. Step back. Let them pass without noticing. But before I could move, a staff member stepped up beside me with a polite smile. "Ms. Collins," she said, just loud enough, "Mr. Harrington would like you positioned near the wall for the announcement." So instead of disappearing, I found myself standing directly beside my own framed photo as my family crossed the foyer. They didn't see me at first. Their eyes were too busy soaking in the decor, the guests, the promise of what this night represented for them. Celeste tapped her champagne glass gently. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Tonight is about family, partnership, and the people who stood with this company when things looked impossible." She gestured toward the wall. "We built this to remind ourselves that behind every chart are real people. People who changed everything." She stepped closer to my frame. "One of those people," she said, smiling, "is someone very dear to us." Then she pointed. "This is Maya Collins." The room seemed to tilt. My parents froze mid-step. Ryan's head snapped toward the wall. My mother's eyes moved from the photo to me, standing right beside it, and I watched the recognition hit her in real time. Celeste kept going, reading the plaque aloud. Data and growth strategist. The mind behind the turnaround that kept these resorts alive when travel collapsed. She turned fully toward me, her expression shifting into delight. "Maya," she said, louder now, "you're here. You're Ryan's sister." The silence that followed was deafening. Heads turned. People looked from me to Ryan, then to my parents, then back to the wall. Graham stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp. "You never mentioned your daughter was our Maya," he said to my parents. My father opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked like he wanted the marble floor to swallow him. My mother tried to recover. We didn't realize you knew her like that," she said weakly. "She does some computer work. We didn't think it was relevant." A few nearby guests exchanged looks. Graham's jaw tightened. "Without her," he said evenly, "this party doesn't happen. This company doesn't recover. Half the people in this room would be polishing resumes." Celeste laughed softly, but her words landed hard. "We've been bragging about her for months. I can't imagine hiding someone like Maya." Ryan finally reached me, his face pale. "You didn't tell me you were working with them," he said under his breath. I met his eyes. "You didn't ask." Later, my parents cornered me in a quiet hallway, away from the music and champagne. "You made us look ridiculous," my mother whispered, her voice shaking. "We had no idea." "I know," I said calmly. "That's kind of the point." My father tried to reclaim control. "You could have warned us. We would have prepared differently." "Prepared how?" I asked. "By inviting me this time? By pretending you were proud?" Ryan stepped in, desperate. "Maybe we handled things wrong," he said. "But you know how Mom and Dad are. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. You want to be part of this family, right?" And that was the moment everything finally settled. I realized how much energy I'd spent shrinking myself, editing my personality, hoping they'd decide I was acceptable. Don't ask too much. Don't outshine. Don't embarrass. "I will always be your sister," I said to Ryan. "And I'll always be their daughter. But I'm done begging to belong in rooms that only accept me if I pretend I'm smaller." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We were just afraid," she said. "Afraid you'd embarrass us." I nodded. "And tonight, you learned the only embarrassing thing was how little you believed in me. That wasn't cruelty. It was truth. Back in the ballroom, when Graham introduced me on stage as a key partner, the applause felt different from anything I'd ever chased before. It wasn't polite. It wasn't conditional. It came from people who valued results, not appearances. Standing there under that warm light, I understood something I wish I'd learned years earlier. Sometimes the most powerful payback isn't loud or cruel. It's simply refusing to shrink anymore. When the applause finally settled and the music picked back up, I stepped off the small stage feeling lighter than I ever had at one of my family's events. Not because I'd won something, and not because my parents looked stunned or ashamed, but because for the first time, I hadn't had to explain myself. My work had spoken before I ever opened my mouth. People came up to me in small clusters after that. Board members. Investors. Operations directors. They didn't ask where I went to school or why I chose this path. They asked about forecasting models, about long-term demand curves, about how we balance profitability with brand trust. Conversations I'd had 100 times before, but never in a room where my parents were listening. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see them watching me. My mother hovered near a cocktail table, nodding stiffly whenever someone spoke to her, her smile too tight. My father stood with Ryan, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid. They looked like guests who had wandered into the wrong event and were afraid someone would ask them to leave. At one point, my mom tried to join a conversation I was in. She stood beside me, laughing a beat too late at a joke she didn't understand. When someone asked how she knew me, she opened her mouth, hesitated, then said, "She's my daughter." The way she said it was different than before. Less dismissive. Less apologetic. Like she was still trying to figure out how to say it at all. Later that night, as the party thinned and the speeches ended, my parents finally approached me together. Not cornering me this time. Not whispering. Just standing there, unsure. "We didn't know," my father said quietly. "We really didn't." "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it without bitterness. My mother looked at the wall again, at my framed photo glowing softly under the lights. "We thought we were protecting him," she said. "Protecting the family." "You were protecting an image," I said gently. "Not the family." She swallowed. "I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo years of being minimized or hidden or treated like a liability. But it was honest, and that was new. Ryan stood there too, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. "I should have asked," he said finally. "I should have known better than to assume." "Yes," I said simply. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. There was no dramatic reconciliation. Just an understanding settling into place, heavy and real. That night, after the gala ended and the resort quieted, I walked past the wall of innovation one last time before heading to my room. Guests were gone. The chandeliers dimmed. The frame still stood, steady and unapologetic. My name was there. Not as someone's sister. Not as an accessory. Not as a risk to manage. As myself. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically become perfect. My parents were awkward around me. Ryan was careful, like he was relearning how to talk to me without filtering everything through expectations. Some habits don't disappear overnight. But something had shifted. They stopped trying to hide me. They started asking real questions. About my work. About my life. Not to show off to others, but because they were finally curious. And when they slipped back into old patterns, I didn't bend myself to accommodate them anymore. I didn't need to. Because the truth was this, the most powerful moment of that entire night wasn't when my name was announced or when the room went silent. It was when I realized I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. I'd spent years thinking the goal was to be accepted by them, to finally be good enough to stand beside them without apology. But standing in that resort, watching my work speak for itself, I understood something much bigger. Belonging isn't something you earn by shrinking. It's something you build by being honest about who you are. If your family has ever treated you like the embarrassing one, the difficult one, the one who needs to be hidden so they can look better, I want you to hear this clearly. Their inability to see your value does not erase it. It never did. You are allowed to build a life that fits you. Even if it doesn't fit their expectations. Even if it makes them uncomfortable at first. You are allowed to stop auditioning for rooms that only want a smaller version of you. That night, my parents had to walk past my framed photo again and again, my name etched into the very world they admired so much. And for once, they were the ones adjusting, the ones unsure of where they stood. I walked freely. Not because I'd embarrassed them. But because I'd finally stopped letting them embarrass me into hiding.